didn't care. He was always on his own time, and we got that from my wife a few times when I went on occasion out with John and came home a few hours late. He was at my house probably 10, 15 years ago, and we took our kids out on a little canoe trip because there's this river that he had read about in one of those mini paperback books he had read about, and he wanted to try it. And we borrowed some kayaks from the neighbors, and we went out, planned to be out a couple of hours. What we didn't realize was that most of that river was about 4 inches deep, and about every 50 feet there was a tree across it. So it took us probably about 6 hours to get through the 3 or 4 miles of the river that we were going to go on. So Townsend time struck again. John loved to wander around and do things on his own time. In fact, today, when I get a chance to spend a little time out and I'm not in a hurry to go somewhere, I'll tell my wife, I'm going to take a Townsend day. And that's a day when you just go out, and if you see a road that looks interesting, you turn down it. You drive down it, you see what's there. There's an interesting place to eat or some little out of the way place. So I will never forget Townsend days, and I will always have them. But they'll never be the same without John. They never are the same without John. John never took life for granted. He always enjoyed the day and what was in the day, the opportunity to do something new, and the chance to teach people things. So how do we know a true friend? To me, it's the person that over 55 years, John and I went through gaps where we wouldn't see each other. We moved in different places, did different activities, but whenever I saw John, it was literally like we had never left. We would just sort of pick up the same conversation. It wasn't like, what should I say to him or whatever. It was just so natural, and I think that's one way that you know a true friend. John was a rebel, a prankster, a storyteller, and a listener of stories. He told great stories, and the kids at camp just loved to hear the stories from him. So to me, he was a teacher, a mentor, and a friend. John was also a baseball fan. And I'll close with a couple of quotes, one of them from a storied philosopher by the name of Yogi Berra, who said something like, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. And I always think of John that way. I always think of John because he loved to take forks in the road. It didn't matter where it was something new, something interesting, something that he could go see. And he often took a less traveled fork. So I thought that perhaps Frost was thinking of John when he said he took the road less traveled by, and that has made all the differences. John took the road less traveled. I was so privileged and fortunate enough to be able to take a few of those roads with him, and to me it certainly made all the differences as well. Rest in peace, John, my friend.
Mila, would you like to say something? Mila the Thai?
Well, I'm just warning you right now, I'm going to be sad. My brother is here, and he's my very best friend in the world, but John was second. And there's no replacing him. And I am dressed today in his honor because he was a world traveler. And I got to travel some parts of those worlds with him. All the jewelry I have on is from countries that he visited, and he did make his mark on lots and lots of people. So I want to tell you a couple of stories. John and I both love dogs. And when we met many years ago, neither one of us had a dog. But since that point, I did get a dog, and I would go to John's house and often take my dog and spend the night, separate rooms, of course. And I didn't know him in that way, not in a biblical sense. So the first few times I was there, Lek, my dog, was only allowed to stay on the porch. And then after a couple times, he said, your dog's pretty well behaved. he can come inside the house as long as he stays over here in the living room. Can you bring a bed for me? Sure, we did that. Well, it wound up, Leck could actually end up sleeping on the bed with me because John liked this dog so well. So one time we were there visiting, and those of you who know lived on this beautiful piece of property on the river, and I live next to my brother on another beautiful piece of property. So my dog was used to running loose and coming back. But this one day, he didn't come back for quite a while. So I started to be a little concerned. I said, John, I haven't seen Leck for a while. You seen him out the window? No, we were sitting on his patio in front. So I got up and started looking down, went down to the river, walked the beach there, and went over to the neighbors where the road was, no sign. So it's been a couple hours and no sign of my dog. So I would get what you'd call worried. And John at this time was restricted in his movement, let's put it that way. He was using his walker a lot, but it pained him to get up. So he looked, we're sitting on the patio, and he looked over at me and said, this is a hell of a note. This woman that I care about has lost her dog, probably to some boater coming by and offering him a steak, and I don't even have the energy to get up and hug her. That was John, always thinking of the other person, what their experience was like. Because he never whined about his afflictions and all that he had to deal with, and that was something that I learned from him. That he never complained, and I'd ask him about something. He said, well, that's going to be taken care of when I go to this doctor, or I got that lined up and I'm going to be doing these PT exercises. And he had all these ropes, you know, and rubber bands and stuff in his house. So he was an excellent human being in that regard. And then the other story, what was the other story I was going to tell? I'm old too. What was it? It's about the dog, and I don't know. I'll think of it, and then maybe I'll come back up. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, we still have time for you if once that senior moment passes. Anybody else would like to say something? Remembrances? Come on up. Thank you so much. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Ken Sulak. Most of you don't know me probably. I've been to a couple of the Townsend reunions. I met John about 10 years ago. He called me, and then he emailed me, invited me to give a talk at the Humanist Society in Gainesville. And my talk was about the Gulf sturgeon in the Swanee River, something that I had been working on for about 25 years. And subsequently, I ended up giving at least 3 talks, maybe 4 at the Humanist Society over the years, one about Darwin, one about Florida settlers. But when he first invited me, and by email, and his last name is Townsend, and the world's full of Townsends. There are a lot of folks. And so I teased him when he said, yeah, I said, you know, my wife's side of the family from up in North Georgia, but one side of her family were Townsends, and I said, you're probably related. And so after that, he started calling me Cousin Ken. And it wasn't until after he passed that I found out that they are related, because I had my wife's family tree going back to a Delilah Townsend, Billy Townsend up in North Georgia, and she married a guy named Josiah White. Turns out both families came over to Jamestown in the 1600s. They both did the normal thing of moving down to the Carolinas and Georgia and ending up in Florida. It's a typical route for migrants. Those families had a lot of kids. Those who knew John Hill, the patriarch in Florida, he had 10 or so kids maybe. Only the eldest one could inherit the property. And so the rest of them had to branch out on their own to find another place, so the family would keep moving over generations. Anyway, we got to be pretty good friends. I would stop over on the river and visit with John periodically, and we would talk about a lot of things. I was very interested, and still am, and have been researching early settler history in North Florida. And it turns out the patriarch in North Florida was John Hill Townsend, who settled right there, almost exactly where John was living. And they had a ferry that went across the river. My research has been about all the old settler fords, ferries, and bridges across the Swanee and the other rivers in the system. And it turns out I discovered there was a ferry right there. You've been to that landing, which used to be called Callaway Landing. I can't figure out why, but it was the site of the 1860 Townsend Ferry, which John Hill sold to the Barnes brothers later on. But so I found out the whole story about the origin of that ferry and the turpentine and general store and other industries that John Hill did. I teased Swanee John, one time that besides the turpentine still, he probably had another still there to make some blind tiger. And John got kind of offended by that because he said there's no way in the world that preacher would ever put up with alcohol. So, but we had some good times. I kind of like to play the devil's advocate. John was firm in his views about certain things, and I'm kind of in the middle of things, like, so I take the devil's advocate and get him fired up, and he could get fired up about something that he firmly believed in. But we ended up being pretty good friends, and I actually visited him about 2 weeks before he passed along, and I had offered to ride him up to South Carolina. He was going to get some kind of surgery up in South Carolina to help with his leg that wasn't functioning right, and I offered to ride him up there, and he was worried about the cost of gas to go up there, which wouldn't have been a problem at all. Anyway, we got to be good friends, and it turns out that after he passed, just a short period after that, Mr. CL and I had been communicating, and he passed along some information from the Townsend line. I had my wife's family tree going up to Delilah Townsend up in North Georgia. Turns out that Delilah was the daughter of William Thomas Townsend, whose father was William Townsend, who was the father of another William Townsend, who was the father of John Hill Townsend. And so my wife and Swanee John are something like cousins 8 generations down the line. So anyway, I just, a curious twist of fate where we started teasing about being related, and it turns out that my wife and John really are related.
Who else would like to remember John? Go ahead, Ian.
Well, after hearing Ken talk about the John Hill Townsend family, I want to connect some dots for you, and I especially want to thank Donna and Lee's friend for singing the line, because family was very important to John, and he cared about ancestry. And he was, he took a hold of the responsibility of organizing the Townsend reunion every year after the previous generation passed on. And he would work with CL and Dale and others to make that happen. Now we got to figure out who's gonna step up. Just putting everybody on notice that that's a hole we need to fill. So Donna, thank you for playing that song. That was one of John's very favorite, and it was because family was so important to John. So CL's going to talk a little bit about getting reconnected with John. When as Joe said, you know, when you embark on life, you take different trails, and so CL and John did, but they got back together, and John really had a role in CL proposing to me 30 years ago. So John was a hiker, and he had done the Appalachian Trail in various segments. And one year he needed to do he was doing some parts in Maine and New England, and he asked CL if CL would do a piece with him, and CL said yes. So it was 3 days. John, I'm sure, had been conditioning, carrying a pack and hiking for days and weeks in preparation. CL might have done 2 days. He did buy, I think, 4 boxes of mule skin, if anybody knows what that is, to take with him. And anyway, I dropped them off in Stratton, Maine, and I was to pick them up 3 days later in Rangeley, Maine, at a certain time. So I was there, but in the meantime, in those 3 days, there was bad weather, it was cold, they were soaked, and John was pushing, you know, because John he was detailed, he was on a schedule, and he had to be someplace else, so I'm sure he was pushing CL very hard. So I was there a couple hours early, and finally, who comes out first but CL? So I get out of the car and I go to greet him. He drops on his knees and says, "Will you marry me?" I didn't say a word, because I knew it didn't matter who was there at that moment. He would have asked him, "Will you marry me?" So it wasn't until 4 months later that he actually did an official proposal with a ring. But that was John's role in CL's and my engagement, if you will. I was, became very close to John. CL and I both, of course, from that time on, and often referred to me, whenever he would call, if I'd answer the phone, "Hello, cousin sister Ione." I was always cousin sister, and CL was always cousin brother. But we were that close. We were like sisters and brothers. And CL and John were like brothers. And I valued that. And like Isla, I'm going to miss that. Like all of us, I'm going to miss that. But I want to tell you a fun little story. So CL and I, a lot of you know, are politically active. We've been trying to get John to be active. And actually, in the last couple of months of his life, he actually started to, indicate to us that he wanted to be more involved. And anyway, 2008, Obama's inauguration. CL and I were going, and John said he would like to go. So he met us up there. CL and I took a very long bus drive up to Washington, and he picked us up, and we stayed with Joe and Marion. And so the morning of the inauguration, CL had a role. He was going to be in the parade representing the Peace Corps of Malaysia. So we parted ways when CL had to go meet his group, and John and I had picked out a gate that we wanted to get through so that we could get to the stands easy enough so that we could see CL in the parade. So we were there, I think it was 5:30 in the morning. I know we left your house in the middle of felt like in the middle of the night, Joe, to get on the train and get in there. And so we said goodbye to CL, and we found our way to our gate. And we kept waiting and waiting and waiting for the gate to open. And we kept hearing rumors that it was going to open at such and such a time, and at such and such a time. Well, it finally became clear, there were other gates that were open and people were going through, that our gate was never going to open. So we saw our gate over there and said, well, let's go over there. And, we pretty much drank all of John's coffee and the hot chocolate he had in his thermoses in his backpack, and it was cold. I'm a maniac, and I know all about layering, but it was cold. And we were both dressed appropriate, but boy, when it's only 20 degrees in Washington, D.C., it's cold. And by then I'd been living in Florida and was pretty well acclimated, right? So anyway, so we go to this other gate. And it's very clear we're not going to get through that gate either. So John says, well, let's go back to Joe's and we'll watch it on TV. So we head back to Union Station. And we stop at every restaurant and every hotel. from that gate to Union Station. And they were all booked up and they wouldn't let us in. You know, at 11 o'clock, they were going to be closed down, so there was no way we could get in and get in front of a TV and watch anything. So we got to Union Station, and there was this TV mounted on the wall, but no sound. So John and I sat down. We had a while before the next train to get us back to Joe's house was going to come along. And in his backpack, he had this old transistor radio. And he had he never went anywhere unless he was prepared, right? And he had one set of earbuds. So we sat on the floor, no sound, but we could see everything. He gave me one earbud, and he sat beside me, and he had the other earbud. Nobody else could hear a thing. So we're going through Obama's inauguration, and we would all of a sudden start clapping and screaming, and then everybody else would follow suit and start. They didn't have any idea why we were clapping, but this went on for an hour. Well, not quite an hour, because the train finally came. That's one of my fondest memories of John. We did make it back to Joe's in time to watch CL in the parade on TV, and it was a lot warmer there. But John, we became very close. I'm a little bit of a prude, and I was 63 years old and had never tried pot. But one weekend, trusting John and CL, John had a little toke. And so I tried it for the first time at 63 years old, and I felt very safe and very comfortable in their company. And John introduced me to a lot of things in life: the Will McLean Festival, Florida folk music. The cousins always went on a canoe trip, but every now and then he and CL and I would go on a trip, and we, the three of us, actually went to the Boundary Waters and had for 5 days and had a great time. So I'm going to miss my cousin brother John very much. Thank you.
And Mila, have you remembered your story? Okay.
I should have taken notes written down there. Okay, so about a year ago, I invited John to go check out the Village. It's a retirement community here in Gainesville that's associated with Santa Fe College. And he said, I don't want to do that. He says, I don't ever want to live there. And I said, John, we don't know what's going to happen in life. We should go see what's available in the community, find out what our choices are. I said, besides, it's a free meal. Oh, okay, I'll go. That's the guy I go. So we were there a couple of hours with this guy, taking us from one building to the other and finding all the amenities available and so forth. So finally we left her, and I was reading some of the material, and I said, John, this says you cannot smoke anywhere on campus, cigarettes. And he said, that can't be right. And I said, well, it's right here in the policies. And he said, all right, then we got to figure out where I could go to get a cigarette. So we spent the next hour and a half walking around and driving around the perimeter of the Villages, seeing where there's a sidewalk that he could get up on his walker and get out over the line of the property, which was, it's a restricted community, so it's kind of hard there. But we finally did find one place. So he said, well then, if I ever did move here, I'd have to live in that building because it's the closest to this ramp. So a couple days later, he called me and said, Mila, I've been thinking about that Village thing, and he said, I'm pretty sure I don't ever want to leave Riverence. And he didn't.
Anyone else would like to, is inspired to speak?
Gotcha. Go ahead. All right. Everyone, my name is Clyde Townsend. I'm younger Townsend in the line, but it was great to hear that song and thinking about John. I received emails from him regularly. He was a great correspondent, great friend, even to a young guy. He sent me after one Townsend family reunion, he sent me the line in an email. We'd been talking about Florida folk music, and was going into my law school time in Tallahassee, and he was giving me some ideas about cool nature walks and things, and he goes, "Oh, I remembered the song that I wanted to show you," and he'd attached it to the email. And I was going back through, as we were coming up here, all the different emails throughout my life, high school graduation, college graduation, law school graduation, marriage. He was a great guy. He was a great friend, obviously, to everybody here. Great cousin, uncle, and he'll be sorely missed.
And Cody?
I'm Cody. My great-grandmother was Tippy Townsend, and I had the honor of discreet camping with John a couple of times on lands both public and otherwise. I think to him he was comfortable doing it because the land wasn't anyone but the rivers to him, and he was just an otter who crawled out of the river and always dived back in. And, I'm not gonna get used to not seeing him. I'm gonna try and learn to see him in the trees and hear him in the breeze and feel him in the coolness of the water. As Jack mentioned, everyone was special to John. Everywhere that he went was special to John. More than probably anyone I've ever met, he was really part of the world, and he still is.
We have more time if anybody would like to speak up. Good, well, let's thank all of the people who gave us such touching reminders of John. And now we're going to be listening to a song which I believe he absolutely loved, the Lullaby of the Rivers, particularly because of his fondness for nature, his fondness for rivers. And this is a song that is going to be, it really touches my heart too.
Hachi Kissimmee, Bucklocky, Choctahatchee, Yucalahatchee and the Swanee are singing the lullaby of the rivers. There are those who came before us to this land they call Blackwater, knew their lives were mirrored so completely in the water. Our rivers are singing that story, full of mystery and wildness. Our lives forever flowing to the lullaby of the rivers. Ocklawaha, Itchitaquee, Econfina with Lapucci, Apalachicola, Wacalla, Wasissa, Osilla, Caloosahatchee, Kissimmee, Bucklocky, Choctahatchee, Yucalahatchee and the Swanee are singing the lullaby of the rivers. Alapaya, Homosassa, Alapaha, Cocohatchee, Pitlachaskatee, Chicola, Sopchoppy, Wekiva, Alatlakaha, Estero, Steenhatchee, Tolamato, Chassawiska and Mayaca are singing the lullaby of the river. Alafaya, Alapaha, Chattahoochee, Choctahatchee, Cocohatchee, Econfina, Fakahatchee, Homosassa, Blackahoochee, Swanee, Pitlachaskatee, Osilla, Apalachicola, Kissimmee, Chipola, Ocklawaha, Wakasasa, Wikiwachi, Withlacoochee, Itchitucknee, Waxahachie, Tolamato, Palatlakaha, Estero, Escambia, Mayaca, Wasissa, Caloosahatchee, Chassahowitzka, Ocklawaha, Itchitucknee, Econfina with Lapucci, Apalachicola, Wacalla, Wasissa, Osilla, Caloosahatchee, Kissimmee, Bucklocky, Choctahatchee, Yucalahatchee and the Swanee are singing the lullaby of the river.
You think he used that as a guide to where he was going doing that? I mean, I wonder as it was going, I found myself wondering how many of those he was doing. Yeah, right. Too big.
Really inspiring and makes us really think of our awe for nature and the importance of the Native Americans who lived here. CL will now give the family eulogy. Thank you so much.
Hunter Thompson reminds us that life is not a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely and well preserved. Rather, it is to arrive on a broad slide, totally worn up, totally used up, and proclaiming, "Wow, what a ride." I think we can say John Townsend would say, "Wow, what a ride." Can I get an amen?
Amen.
My name is C.L. Townsend. I'm one of his cousins, of many cousins in the Townsend and Richardson family. And we today, along with the Humanist Society, are very glad that you joined us here to celebrate John Townsend's life and the very good friend and beloved cousin that he was. John lived a life of curiosity, of communication, and connection. He mesmerized us, he entertained us. He was a traveler, a paddler, a hiker, a reader, a lover of music and words, and he was so organized. His adventures took him to many countries, involving 5 continents of the world. And each time he would learn some of the phrases or dialogues of those countries and take those with him. And then he would come back and share those experiences with us. Not in a boastful way, but just in normal conversation, he would share his observations and the experiences that he had. He camped and canoed all over the U.S. One of his mantras was, "So many rivers, so little time." Many of us have memories of those trips. Mine particularly is John being way out in front on the river, floating with the current, waiting for the rest of us to catch up, having a smoke or a toke, and listening to his favorite music on his MP3 players. He hiked the entire Appalachian Trail over several years. He even hiked the Pacific Rim Trail in preparation for Aaron and Laura's wedding in Berkeley. But he chose to camp all weekend. He didn't just hike the trail, he had his gear, and besides, the hotels were too expensive. John had a great appreciation for music, and he loved all genres of music. And he had a great interest in all the details. He wanted to know who the lyrist was, who the vocalist was, who was playing what instrument, and then he had his own opinion about how well it was done, which he would share if you were interested or if you weren't. He had an awesome memory for the details of the music over time. Now, as a musical performer and a lover of music, John came to the mandolin late in life and found it difficult with the fingering. So at the campfires and at the festivals, the rattle was his go-to instrument. But he had a great mellow baritone. What it may have missed in quality, though, he made up for with his enthusiastic volume of his singing. The festivals were a great source of enjoyment for John. He would travel long distances for these. Mostly music, but also storytelling. He would sit there with his folding chair, his pen, his program, making copious notes and remembering who did what and when and why. And again, he would share that sometimes with the participants, sometimes with the observers, sometimes with his partners. The Will McLean Festival was really special for John. It's here in Dade City. The festival was special because I think, A, it was close to home. B, it was inexpensive, as festivals go. But it had great music about Florida. It had great artists. It had the late night campfire jams that went on into the wee hours. And it had plenty of happy hours with his ever faithful green cooler there. So he was also a prodigious reader, lover of language and words, great Scrabble player. We all know some of his phrases he would post on his wall of wisdom. Some of those are in your program and in your gift. My favorite, or one of my favorites, was for his knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing that you don't put it in a fruit salad. High Springs Library was a favorite stop of his on his way into Gainesville, or into Alachua, to the Temple of the Universe for his weekly yoga session, or have a visit with his friends at the Humanist Society. Every time I called him, he would have an opportunity to share with me from the multiple books he was reading at one time, things that he had learned, and these satisfied his curiosity about the world around him. He could easily engage with anyone, and often with new acquaintances, family or friends, very easily. He was not, even though had strong opinions, he was still able to communicate and talk with people and query with them on a wide range of topics. One of the things he enjoyed especially was our Townsend family reunions and the opportunity to converse and meet with people around the boiled peanuts and the homemade ice cream on the Saturday evenings, and to play frisbee and tell stories to our younger set of kids. So, was John organized? I think we've heard today that might be an understatement. From his trip planning, his trip packing, his repacking the canoe for the next leg, only in his way, to his menus he prepared for camping and our trips, to menus for his guests or for special events, to the records that he kept about daily life, household affairs, his car, medical issues, internet troubles, his financial affairs, and his gardening. His herb garden was especially important to John. In some ways, he was sort of a pharmacist. He had things he could help you with. He was thrifty. We've heard frugal. My favorite story is his use of or reuse of the Ziploc baggies. He had a whole row of them in front of his sink that he was going to reuse. Some have told stories about his reuse of paper towels. Others have stories, as Jack mentioned, about our trips, and also his intense bargain hunting and the research that went into why he needed or not needed to buy a item. But he was extremely hospitable. Hardly anyone would ever come to John's home without being greeted with a frozen vodka tonic in a mason jar, as a way of greeting you there to enjoy his company. John returned home in 2019 from his trip to the Balkans with a walking cane for the first time that I had known him. In 2020, well, that was in November. In December at Christmas, when he came to our home, you could tell that his foot drop was very much more pronounced. But in 2020, he got some relief from some neck and back surgery. In 2021, he began, it seemed, to accept the limitations that he was going to have, and he was living with them with a great sense of humor and great courage that was really inspiring. There was a possibility with more neck injuries that he would become quadriplegic, but that was clear to us John did not want to go down that road. And, not surprising, he had a backup plan. He was ready. So, the internal bleed came really out of the blue, and his heart gave out while they were trying to locate it and stop it. Each of us have had our lives enriched by John and the energy and interest he brought to living and the relationships he's had with each of us. And he's left us way too soon. So today we celebrate his life and honor his values of curiosity, communications, and connections. And as we go forward, we can keep alive the memory of John Townsend, or Swanee J, just by saying his name and smiling. And remember, when it's 5 o'clock somewhere, John will be there. Thank you again on behalf of the Townsend and Richardson family for attending today and celebrating John's life and our memories. He did live a life that shouts out, wow, what a rock.
And now let's hear the song Common Ground. And you have the words so that you can sing along with it. It's in the program.
Yeah, we asked you to sing along on the chorus. Move this over here. On common ground we stand united, is common ground that sets us free to reach out to each other when there is no hope to see. On common ground we travel onward to our future, to our fate. For our children and their children, common ground we will create. In our work, in our endeavors, in our prayers and in our play, the things that make us different guide us to a brighter day. As we strive to make life better, we provide ourselves a key to find those common threads that weave a splendid tapestry. On common ground we stand united, this common ground that sets us free to reach out to each other when there is no hope to see. On common ground we travel onward to our future, to our fate. For our children and their children, common ground we will create. Let us seek our own uniqueness. As individuals we stand. With our talents and our dreams, let us create a better land. Let us use our children's laughter as a healing for our pain. The smallness that we lose is ourselves we have to gain. On common ground we stand united, this common ground that sets us free to reach out to each other when there is no hope to see. On common ground we travel onward, to our future, to our fate. For our children and their children, common ground we will create. In our cultures and traditions, in our songs and in our art, the golden age we yearn for grows from deep within each heart. Our fears will be our downfall, so hope must be our guide. And we sing the songs of peace, we'll meet our future side by side. On common ground we stand united, it's common ground that sets us free, to reach out to each other when there is no hope to see. On common ground we travel onward, to our future, to our fate. For our children and their children, common ground we will create.
Bravo, thank you so much. Let me close by a reading. Memory is a precious possession. It captures the past and trains it to our need. The harshness of old events is softened by vagueness, and the pleasures of happy moments are sharpened by vivid imagination. Loved ones linger on in the glory of their individual uniqueness. In life, they will to live and hew the path of their personal difference. In death, they transcend decay, and find their niche in fond remembrance. No person is defined by the sameness of another. If it were so, memory would die from generalities. To us, John Townsend is immortal. May the memory of John, whom we loved in life and still love in death, bless our thoughts and actions. May the memory of his life reach out to touch our hearts and give us hope. Thank you so much. So let me just remind you that we have a reception right now, and if you look behind you, you'll see lots of goodies, and there are takeaway gifts over here for you. And in addition, if you like, there'll be a scattering ash ceremony that will take place. We'll meet at 5:30 at 5880 Northwest 57th Court in Bell. And we'll try to have that available for you to write down if you need to. So thank you all for coming, and it's time to really enjoy ourselves at this point. Thank you.